All right, greetings everyone. How you doing today? And this is episode 11 of Inside Track, my weekly live stream. It's mostly music education. My name's Pete Calandra, and I cover a wide variety of topics on this stream. And this week's topic is some tips on how to compose a network sports theme. So just let's take care of a little business before we start with the lesson. If you like this video, give a thumbs up. For more content, please subscribe, and to be notified, ring that bell. Also, this video is 100% certain to be demonetized. So in the description box below, I've got a link for my Amazon and iTunes stores where you can purchase a single, a couple of singles, an album. I've got over 10 albums of music, instrumental music out, so you'd really help out the channel if you could do that. All right. So again, if you like this video, give a thumbs up and subscribe. And then, since this will be demonetized for sure, please consider supporting the channel with a purchase of a single or two or an album. All right. So let's get into it. So who am I, right? I'm some guy on YouTube. Well, I've also been a professional composer and a professional keyboard player in the burning cauldron, which is also known as New York City. And right here, I've got a partial list of theme songs I've composed for network sports. And at some point around 2013 or 12 or 11, I had over 30 theme songs running simultaneously across America. So the very first theme song I wrote was something called I, Max, which was there's a talk show host on ESPN called Max Kellerman. His first solo show was called IMAX, and it was tongue-in-cheek, like just a sports talk show, and it ran on the Fox Sports Network in 2004. It only ran for about 10 months, unfortunately, because he had a family tragedy, and he stopped being on television for a little while. Then the next one I wrote, I co-composed with a couple of other people, was called Sports List for FSN. Then I started getting some stuff from ESPN, City Slam, Dream Jobs, Teammates. And then I got some work from the Madison Square Garden Network, and I composed the New York Knicks theme that ran from 2006 until about 2009. Knicks Game Night, Knicks in 60, Madison Square Garden theme, the logo I wrote, Knicks Tailgate theme, Hockey Night Live. And then I got a big gig in 2007 for Comcast, which is now NBC Sports Net. And I wrote about 10 theme songs for various programming. These are the most heard ones. Hockey, NCAA sports, pre and post game live. Oh, and then the Sports Net, Sports Reporter, but actually another one, which was the Sports Night, which is really was very popular, and I think it's still running. And then I got a job the next year writing a bunch of themes for Big Ten Network, Big Ten Football, Football Saturday, Coach's Corner, Coach's Q&A, Big Ten Tonight. Oh, I did the basketball, Greatest Games, softball, women's sports, generic. And then here in New York, there's SNY, which is Sportsnet New York, and that's the Mets, the New York Mets baseball team. They own that station, and I've written the theme song for their sports night. And I've done 3 different ones, and we can listen to them. 2008, 2014, and 2018. And then I wrote the FIFA World Cup theme for Fox Sports in 2015. And then in that year, I also wrote the Special Olympics World Games theme for ESPN. And the next year, I wrote the Invictus Games theme for ESPN. So, and then there's other ones that I've written that I don't have up here. And then, so I've had a lot of experience writing theme songs. Now, the one thing I want to say about writing theme songs for sports programming is that it can be very lucrative for you, especially if you get write something that's on a lot. So, for example, the sports nights, there's a sports recap show that's on every night, and then the cable stations broadcast it, replay it like 5, 6, 7 times over the next 24 hours. And all that usage adds up, right? And it can create quite a nice revenue stream if performance royalties from BMI. And that might be a subject I touch on in a future stream. So, yeah. And again, if you've got any comments or any questions, please leave them in the description box below, or in the chat room, and I'm monitoring that over in that corner there. So, the big thing to think about is that to not have a standardized idea about what a sports theme is, because there's so many different kinds of music that have been sports themes for sports programming. But the one thing that you should realize that is true of any kind of theme song for any kind of television programming, whether it's Fox, whether it's a sports or sitcom or drama, television, news, a talk show, anything, is that it brands the show. And the main function of television is selling advertising. And to have a brand that is associated with a piece of music, or a piece of music that's associated with a brand or a television show, will help ratings and will help generate more revenue for the broadcasters, because they can charge more for advertising. And one of the big devices that I use, and I find in all the great sports themes, is something that I call a mnemonic, right? And I've got that right here. And what is a mnemonic? A mnemonic is a device such as a pattern of letters, ideas, or associations that assists in remembering something. Okay? It's also an adjective, something that is aiding or designed to aid the memory. Mnemonic. So if you think about the NFL on Fox, which I didn't write, although I've done some arrangements of that music. That's been running for over 30 years, since 1990 something. 1990. And that is like in the lexicon of American television, because football, unfortunately, is the most popular sport. It's actually the most popular show on television is NFL football. It gets the highest ratings. And so many people have heard, millions and hundreds of millions of people have heard that theme over the last 30 years. So what do I mean? Let's take a listen to a few that I've done, and I can talk about it. So the other thing, too, to remember is that each kind of programming has a particular style to it. So the first piece I'm going to play for you, and I've got 3 pieces where we're going to look at the Pro Tool sessions and really break it down. So you could think of this lesson here going to be broken down into 2 sections. The first section will be hear me just playing music and talking about it. And then the second section will be just diving into recording sessions and looking at arrangements and getting really deeply detailed into it, including how to set up a recording session properly. So we'll talk about that in a big studio with lots of live players. All right, so the very first one that I got, this IMAX theme, what they wanted to do was they wanted to have a hard-hitting sports show that, as they said, with a wink. You know, they didn't want it to be taken too seriously. Like, they're up there being serious and, you know, jousting with each other, verbally sparring with each other and roasting each other when they're talking about sports and everything. But it was all done tongue-in-cheek, sort of. So they asked me to take a listen to spaghetti Western music, right? And to come up with something like, you know, this big bad dude like Clint Eastwood or something, but have it be a little bit humorous. So let's take a listen to this. And we recorded this with a live brass section at Avatar Studios in New York City in 2004. So let's take a listen. All right. So as you can hear, it had some of the elements of that spaghetti western, like the corny tune. It had the wooden flute, like uh, uh, the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And that's my friend Kathleen Nestor. She plays in the New Jersey Symphony. She plays wooden flute on that. And I actually just had her come into my studio space in Midtown and in my booth and just record a couple of riffs, and then I fit them into the track afterwards. So what you could see is that dun da 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 dun da 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 dum, right? That's sort of like a spaghetti western tune, and that's a mnemonic. It's like a theme that you can hear, that you can remember. It's very diatonic. It's very catchy. It's based on a pentatonic scale, and all the orchestration, the harpsichord, the strumming guitar, right? All that stuff is just sort of like stuff that I listened to, how Ennio Morricone sort of put together some of his works. And I didn't steal the music, but I just was influenced by the arranging and the musical vocabulary. So that's the first one there. And that ran for 10 months. And that was really my first big, and I still remember the recording session. We got like some of the best players in New York to play on it, which was really great. I believe we had 4 trumpets. We had 4 trombones and 4 French horns, 3 trombones, and 3 bass trombones, I think we had. And I think we also had one of the bass trombonists overdubbed tuba on a second track. Okay, so moving right along to the Big Ten Network. We're going to listen to something called the Big Ten Network Greatest Games. And what this was, that the Big Ten Network had an archive of hundreds of athletic competition, and they made that into a very easy television show. They just rebroadcast the game, and at the beginning they'd have somebody talking for a few minutes about it, and then they'd go right into the game, and then at halftime they'd maybe talk a little bit more about the game and who was playing what and any kind of interesting storylines. But it was a very simple show for them to put together, and what they asked me to do was to have something that sounded like it was retro. And so let's take a listen to this. And also they wanted something in the middle that was very sweeping and grand. So let's take a listen. All right, so it seems like I'm having a little trouble with the image. So give me a second here to see if I can fix that. Let's see. How am I going to do this? Okay, so this really stinks. I'm very upset about this. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start this again, and let's pick it up from this point. And this will be part 1, and then we'll pick it up with part 2. All right, so I'm going to end this stream and start a new one. So everybody just, if you can come back in, I don't know what's going on with this. So give me about 2 minutes to restart everything here. All right, so I should be back right now. I'm going to cut this out of the other bit. All right, so let's see. Okay, so I'm just going to go forward. I can see that I'm talking here, and yeah, I'm moving on the screen. All right, so I'm going to go through after this is done if you want to review this, and I'm going to cut this little section out. I don't know why that's happening. All right, so moving forward, you could hear that that was a very retro piece. It had like that really sweeping section in the middle, and it had a nice button at the end that was the mnemonic for that. So let's move forward to Comcast NBC Sports Night. All right, so let's talk about this for a second. So it starts off with that bump da da ba dee da, and then it goes right into the tune. So that bump da da ba dee da, that's like a fanfare, an opening clarion to get your attention. And then when you listen to the melody, it does a lot of ascending, right? Because this is a sports recap show, and I wanted it to be energetic and moving forward. And then, so the opening bit was about 15 seconds long, and then there was a sort of an instrumental section in the middle, and then the theme came back in with the strong button at the end, right? So what that middle section is used for is talking over, right? So there's the graphics, and then after the graphics is over, there's this music that they turn the volume music down, this underscore, and the person's talking. Welcome to Comcast Sports Night, and tonight we're going to go over the Golden State Warriors' epic comeback win, and this and that and the other thing. And we'll be back right after this, and then they go into the graphics come back on again. So that's sort of how that works. And so that's a different kind of sound. Now, the next thing I'll play is something called City Slam for ESPN, which is a 3-on-3 basketball tournament in cities across America. And this was like 2008. And this is completely different, but you can hear how it sort of, they wanted something to sound, again, retro and urban. And so there's this piece here, and let's play it. It's got some vocals on it. So you could see that that's like a pop tune with sort of like Kool and the Gang overtones to it, with live brass, live drums, and I played everything else on it, and I wrote the lyrics. Actually, I did not produce or mix this one. Somebody else was doing that. A producer was doing that. And again, it's got the name of the show in it. It's got the feel that they want, and it's just sort of, you hear that City Slam on ESPN, right? Brings you right into it. So let's see. I'm gonna play. Yeah, let's do one more. So here in New York, you've got a show called Geico Sports Night, and it's on SNY, and it's on every night after whatever sporting event they're showing, whether it's the Nets, and they show a bunch of like college stuff. And so this has been running since 2008, and I wrote 3 different theme songs to it. So I'm going to play you 2 of them. So this is the one from 2014. So let's take a listen to this. So with a track like this, you can see that it's basically just a groove for the whole thing. Do 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 dun dun da 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 dun da 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 dun. And so, you know, they do the opening graphics that are probably like 10 seconds long over that beginning, and then it goes right into that groove, and then they do a cold open, it's called, where it's a preamble to the show where they talk about the topics that they're going to be covering that evening, and then at the end you bring that back in with the button, the mnemonic. Right? And then, so that's, you know, there was one before that I did that I couldn't find, which was more electronic sounding, still with a groove, techno-ish. But the last one I did for them, they wanted something that sounded late night with like a jazz, not jazz feel, but like a funkier kind of brass thing. But let's take a listen to the 60-second version of what's currently on air now. So what I want to say about this and all of these is that they're all like they brand the show. They're all very distinct, stylistically unique for that particular show. They give the format of the show. They give you the feel of the show. They're all energetic, and they all have a button at the end that you can remember that they can use to go in and out of commercials with. Da da dum do dee do da. We'll be back after this word from our sponsors. Da-da-da-doo-dee-doo-da. Right? And then they can have that vamp come in after commercial, and they could talk over it, and it sort of makes a nice transition. So these are all different things about writing these sports themes. So I think that we'll turn the page on just listening to some of these themes and get into the nuts and bolts of a Pro Tools session and some sheet music. So again, if you guys have any questions, leave them in the chat, and also if this is after the fact, leave them in the comment section below. So this is the demo I did in 2015. I don't have the final mix because I didn't do that, for the FIFA World Cup theme for Fox Sports. So this is on fairly often now, even though there's no FIFA. They use it for a bunch of soccer programming. And it's mostly associated with the women's soccer team. So that in 2016, when the United States women won the Gold Cup, and it was in Canada and it was broadcast on a Sunday night in prime time, there were 30 million people watching the broadcast. So when I wrote this piece, there was a lot of stuff to consider. And if I were to tell you that I wrote this piece in a day, the whole piece, a lot of these tracks that are here made it onto the final. All the brass was replaced, but not the lowest brass, but all the percussion, all the drums, the guitars, the vocals, and the strings, the orchestral strings, they're all on this session. I played them all in, and they're all on the final. They recorded the brass in remotely in Germany, I think. I did not mix this. The producer mixed it. So there's a lot of things to consider, right? They wanted I got about 500 emails over the course of 2 weeks before I had free chance to write this track, giving me like all these conflicting direction of what they wanted. And that could be, that 1 2 week period could be the topic of an inside track, like how to not listen to direction when you really should be listening to direction. But what I ended up doing was just getting the feel of what they wanted without being specific as to the music that they wanted. And the things I got was that they wanted it to have an uplifting, fanfare, Olympian kind of sound. They wanted it to have ethnic world elements to it. And they also wanted choir and vocal in it, right? So vocals, it's really difficult. Do you write lyrics? Oh, let's play soccer. What lyrics are that, right? And they even played me a Shakira song that they liked, and I thought, like, no, I can't do that. It just doesn't work. So I got all these elements together. So what I'll do is I'll play the session, and I also made a PDF of the melody that we can follow along with. So let's just take it from here on. Hold on. Here we go. So we're right in this area here. Four, 3, 2, 1. back up here. All right, so that's the level of demo quality that you need to win some of these jobs. And that's why I've said many times before that being a composer in the 21st century is also partly being an engineer and knowing how to take your sequences and make them really come to life so they don't just sound like something that's being played from Sibelius or Finale. And that takes a lot of work. Yeah, thank you, Emilio. That would be the lead vocal or the choirs, I'm going to solo that stuff so you can really hear it. The lead vocal on that is my friend Joy Askew, and she used to tour with Joe Jackson and Peter Gabriel 20 years ago, and she's a solo artist now. She lives in Brooklyn. And basically the way it worked was I wanted a vocal in the middle, and I just made her a stem mix of the middle section, and I said, this is what I want you to do, and then she did it and sent me back her audio files, and then I took a bunch of takes that she did and I edited together what you hear there. So that really worked well. So if we look at the beginning of this, do-da-dum, buck-a-dum, right away, that opening, it's just so memorable, and it's just this big fanfare with big accents. And you could see graphics going over that, and what was really kind of cool was you have to do a bunch of edits for all these things. You have to do a bunch of different arrangements because there's so many different kinds of uses for these themes. And I'm going to go over that in the next two pieces after this in more detail. But basically, that opening theme, actually, what Fox Sports did during the last Women's World Cup 2 years ago was they took that little bit, and whenever they do an update on Twitter every day, they'd play ba-ba-bum, ba-ba-bum, and then they'd show highlights from that day's action, which was kind of cool, right? So what I'd like to say, too, is that during the last Women's World Cup, over the course of the 6 weeks, they had like somewhere between 150 and 200 million people in America watching this, all the broadcast, and this tune and all the different permutations of it was constantly being played during the pregame, going in and out of commercials, opening and everything. And, there was like thousands of performances of it over the course of the 6 weeks. And it's just really kind of, it's like a great way to get your music out there, knowing that you've created something that so many people are hearing, and it's sort of branding an event. And every time they play that, anytime that it's replayed, that music is on the show and everything. And it's just really a great feeling. So let's look at, I'm going to get really into this part here. That's just rests here. That's a vamp, but bum, ba ba bum, ba da bum, 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 ba da bum, 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 ba ka dum. Right. So I've got this 4-bar phrase here, and I've got this little bit here that ends on an A, and here it also ends on an A here, but then it goes to the E, which is the 5, which is on an A chord. So we're in the key of D. So that's the 5th of the 5 chord, right? So it's very simple. It's very triadic. There's nothing fancy about it, but everything is ascending and uplifting. Dum, da, da, dum, ba 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 da dum, bum, ba 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 da ba bum, ba ka dum, right? And then the second time through, the rhythm is very similar. And in some, right? And in this measure here, measure 18 corresponds to measure 14. But notice the pitches are different. I start on the 3rd, and I go up to the 6th, right? And then here, I have a half note instead of this bit here, and then this doesn't have a pickup to it. And this ends right on the 5 of the scale. And then here we're in the bridge, right? And the bridge is a contrasting da-da-dum, 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 ba-ba-bum, da-da-dum, ba-ka-dum, ba-da-dum. I'm in the wrong key. And it goes back up to the 5 right here, but it's an octave higher, so I don't repeat that note in the same pitch register, right? So that's also part of writing a melody. So, right, we have very similar rhythms here as the first time through, but the melodic contour is different. Okay, it's got some ascending stuff, and it starts on a higher pitch. So in other words, the first time it starts on a D. Second time it starts on an F sharp. When we go to the bridge, we start on a B, right? So you notice that all 3 times it starts in a different place. Okay, so let's take a look at the session now. We can get more into that. Okay, so I'm going to solo the brass, and we'll take a listen to the opening. Right, and that was all for the final version, replaced with real horn players, and they phrase it a little bit differently on the live version that's on air. Those notes aren't quite legato; they're a little bit da-da-dum, right? They're a little bit more like that, and so we've got this, right? Da-da-dum, ba-ba-bum, and then we've got these low brass right here. Ba-ba-bum. And then right here at measure 4, let's say, the melody switches to the trumpet and the brass is playing, the French horns are playing lower. So this starts with basically a French horn melody with trombones doing the accents, and now the trumpet comes in. And then that's punctuated with this big percussion. And then also with that, we've got some pitched percussion. And then the other thing that's kind of cool about that is the way that I've sort of displaced the melody a little bit. So it starts with a pickup. And then on the second bar, it starts, instead of a pickup, it starts as a pickup to beat 2. Right? So here we have a pickup to beat 1. Da-da-dum. Ba-ba-ba. 1. And again, in the second, over here, it's a pickup to beat 3. So every measure, I'm displacing where the pickup starts by 1 beat, right? So it's kind of, you don't notice it, but it sort of gives it a different feel, so that it's not so regular where everything is. Oh, thank you, Johan. I'm glad it's funny. All right, so. Okay, so that's the beginning, right? And that's all there is there. And then let's just solo the pitched percussion. So it's ch-boom, ch-boom, right? The piatti comes in, and then the tam-tam and the chimes come in. And then right here, we're sort of doubling that. So that's very, very much like Fanfare for the Common Man-ish, sort of with my own groove added to it. So after that, let's just solo all the drums in the next bit. So what happens often is that, oh, my camera's dead. Maybe it's too hot. All right, that's fine. Let's just go to the monitor. So one thing that's happening here is that my air conditioning in my room is really, it's off. They're getting it fixed next week, so this room is a little hot, so maybe my camera got heated up. I'll just rest it. You don't need to see me right now. We can just watch the session, and I'll turn it on later. All right, so there needs to be, for this, right, you need to have into studio music. You need to have something that they can play that leads you in and out of commercial that people can talk over. And I came up with this groove. that I programmed. So we've got this right here called trundle. It's not real. It's kind of like a snare and a tom-tom, and then that fits in really beautifully with these big toms. Right? And then after that little groove plays, right, so let's add our strings. And right here we've got the groove. And welcome tonight to the FIFA World Cup. We have tonight so-and-so against so-and-so. Let's go back to the graphics. And right, so you can see how that works well to be spoken over. There's something that's interesting with that violin part in there. And let's see how I break down that violin part. So let's just solo the strings. So I've got this little ostinato figure here. These are our Spitfire violins. Yeah, Harry, I'm using a bunch of them. So the violins are all Spitfire orchestral and a Spitfire Albion 1. So right here, so we start off simply. And then now we're going to have some low notes coming in here. And notice I've got the violins, as opposed to some of the other sessions I've done, I've got the violins here separated out into sections, right? And I've got my low strings as ensembles. Nice and rich. And then that's also doubled with Monster Low Brass, which I think is from Cinesamples. That's this right here. And then we have the melody coming in. Now what I'd like to do with the melody here is I'm just going to solo the French horns. And then I'm going to solo the strings. And you can hear how I've got the strings in a certain octave here. You can hear how when the melody comes in, I get the strings out of the way of the French horns by transposing them up an octave. 2, 3, 4. And then the trumpets are coming in right here. And the bridge. So that high E on the horns there, that's pretty high up there. Not a lot of that takes like New York City, Los Angeles, London professionals to pull that off, concert number. So the brass there is a combination of Spitfire and Orchestral Tools, Berlin, and Cinesamples as well. I think the big toms and all the drums are from the Hans Zimmer Spitfire. So let's listen to that beginning part again with everything in, all the drums and everything. So we're... Now, one other thing I want to talk about is the rhythm section here. So I've got, if you can believe it, guitars. That's right, I've got guitars. So let's take a listen to the guitars. Now, you wouldn't believe this, but there's a lot of acoustic guitar in this track. Right, playing big open cowboy chords and doubled. Same part, playing it left and right, spread out in the stereo field. And then we'll get to the bridge, right? Well, and then the electric guitar, heavy guitars come in. Now, if you notice when these heavy guitars come in, this is a trick, right? They're playing lower in the pitch register, and they're only playing either single notes or fifths. And these guitars over here, these acoustic guitars, they're playing the higher partials of those chords. And they're doing the rhythm, the strumming, right? That's what's driving it. So if you had all the electric guitars and the acoustic guitars doing everything at the same time, it would get really muddy. But what you want to do is you want to fit these things together like a glove, right? So that everything can find its place and everything can have its function and add to the whole. So if I just mute the guitars there, you can hear how dead it sounds. So no guitar. Guitars are in. Just adds a bit of an edge. And now to the middle section. So let's listen to the middle section without the vocal first. So let's mute this. Right, so that's something that sort of sounds a little bit like The Mission by Ennio Morricone. See, you're bringing him back in there. And let's take a listen to, let's solo the strings and the acoustic guitars, because I think that's pretty cool, the way that they fit together. Right, so that's like, sounds like very proud and majestic, and it's got a very uplifting, positive feel to it, very good positive energy. And the way I'm playing those guitar chords is I'm playing 3-note chords on the top 3 strings of the guitar, right? And they're just triads in different inversions. And I just figured them out and I played them in, and you know, then I wrote the string part against that, and that's how that sort of went down. And now let's listen to that with the lead vocal. Let's see. Here we go. Yeah, that last note she sings, that's tremendous. Let's listen to just the voice. Here we go. Yeah, great. And I forget what sample library I used on this choir. They don't sound great solo, but they sound fine in the mix. And then the very last bit is just everything at full bore for the last time through the verse. Ba, 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 ba. got that nice fanfare with the mnemonic at the end there, and it just sort of ties it all together. And yeah, so there you go. Fox FIFA World Cup theme. Let's see if the camera turns on. This is live streaming after all. Hey, I'm a little out of focus now. Let's fix that. Yeah, here we are. Okay, really professional. Sorry about all that. So that's one example of really taking a nice detailed look at how I constructed that theme. And that's hopefully going to be running for like another 10 years as long as they have the contract, which I think they have right now until at least 2026 or 27, something like that. So that's really cool. So Ian. Thank you, Ian. I appreciate it. What I'm going to do also is I'm going to cut out that middle. Eventually, it takes YouTube a couple days to do it, but I'll find that middle section where the video wasn't streaming, and I'll cut that out so that you won't have to go through that the restart that I did. All right, let's take a look at another one, and let's go here. And you won't. Let's try here. Let's see how long my camera will last. It is kind of hot in this room, so let me close this and don't save. Now, I want to talk about the next one, which is the Special Olympics World Game theme that I did in 2015 for ESPN. But before we do that, I want to talk about the kinds of things that go into recording. So when we did this session, I did it with 19 brass players, and then the rest of my sampled orchestra stayed on. And there's a couple techniques I want to go over. But the first thing I want to do is that if you guys ever are in this situation and you're going to run any kind of recording session, preparation, right? Failing to prepare is preparing to fail. Coach Wooden, right? It's so true. I spent a couple of days preparing for the session, literally. And let me show you what went on. So first of all, a little picture. This is Avatar. This is my friend Ken Freeman behind the Neve console. I didn't want to take a picture of the musicians because then I might have to, and that might be dicey. This is also my friend Steve Vaviakis, who does he's a great engineer also, and mastering engineer in Design Studios. So that's kind of cool. Notice their Pro Tools rig back here, their 24-track machine, and this huge Neve desk. Really great. And this is in 53rd Street, I believe, or 54th Street in Manhattan. All right, so the first thing we did was I had a conversation with the engineer, and we talked about what kind of sound we wanted, and he put together and there were a couple things that I specifically wanted, and he put together a list of microphones, right? And we got this from this Avatar, which is now the power station. Berkeley purchased it. Berkeley in Boston, the music school. And so Maine, right? So this is on the right. This is on the left. So these are spaced pair of AKG C24s. And then, he's got an alternate. Oh, I see. This is ORTF. So that means that they're sort of spaced like a V, probably behind the conductor. Okay, so then you've got these Omni outriggers. So that's like where the conductor's standing in the studio, and then off about 6 or 7 feet to the left and the right. Then they had this thing up in the ceiling because the room at Avatar is a big dome. Seriously, it's like a big yurt, it looks like. And they've got sort of like a little box in the top that's cut open, and they call it the coffin, and they've got a couple of mics that they just leave up there. We didn't use any of those because they sounded not right for this. So on the French horns, we used these TLM 170s behind them. So we had 4 French horn players, and we had 2 pairs of microphones. We had 4 trombone players, and we had Cole ribbon mics in the front. We had 4 bass trombones, and we had 77s, and we had spotted them in the front, and also a tuba, an FET 47 above. And then we had 6 trumpet players. So we had a Beyer 160 ribbon mic for trumpets 1 and 2. For trumpets 2, 3, and 4, we had the same. And for trumpets 5 and 6. So we just called them trumpets 1, 2, and 3. And then a talk back for the conductor. I did not conduct this. I stayed in the studio and produced it. And that's something that I would suggest you all do for your own music, is get somebody else who can conduct, and you stay in the studio and make sure that everything's, and you be the quarterback, making sure that everything is running correctly and that you're getting the sound you want and that your clients are happy. All right. So that's really important. And, okay. And then we have my friend Sherry Rosen, who's the associate conductor at Lion King on Broadway. She conducted this session. She's a tremendous musician. So the next thing we did was we took the studio, and this is the room at Avatar. This is this control room, and this is the playing room. So like I said, it's not a square room. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, six-sided room. And then we drew this up. So this is where the conductor's podium was. This is that ORTF. It could be considered, right? And then here's the outrigger microphones, and here's the black ones are the microphones. So these are trumpets, microphones. Here's the trumpets, trombones, and then French horns. Now, there's a thing about miking French horns that I'm going to talk about in the next bit that we go over. We're going to go over probably another half an hour today if you guys are still, any of you still watching, because I've got more to talk about. And then the next bit I did was I had session notes, right, that I wrote so that I would, or anything that I thought might be trouble, I wrote down here so that I knew exactly what was going to be happening, right? So this is organized, right? You can see. And then the final thing I did was I put run of session. So I had everything written up. We had a schedule, right? And I got this from rehearsing Broadway, right? This is whenever there's a Broadway rehearsal, this is what you have, right? You don't just show up and start doing things unless it's like a one-on-one thing. But when you've got a large ensemble of people, you have to be organized. Otherwise, things just don't get done. So I've got, short break at 1:55, bass, bones, and tuba dismissed, right? So then I've got everything planned out, and it worked really, really well. Okay, let's, good, that's opening. I did the orchestration, yes, but I had somebody else do the sheet music. I made a rough score, Harry, and then they cleaned it up. I just didn't have the time. This is all pressure, and I had a budget. So I had a friend of mine named Philip Thomas, who I actually went to high school with, and he's a professional engraver, and he's a great composer too. And so he put this together for me. So you could see that we've got the score here. And it's just for the brass, right? All the strings and everything else was sampled, all the percussion, my guitars. So we're going to leave the score and not follow along. We're just going to listen to the opening suite. Oh, so you got to think about what this is. Special Olympics, right? Sports, organized sports can be so great. It can be really rotten, but it can be so great. So what the Special Olympics is it takes people who have, I don't know what the right correct term is, but they've got some issues, and challenge of competing in sports and being able to do things with sports gives them a sense of normalcy and helps them as human beings. And it's really an amazing organization, an amazing thing. And Eunice Kennedy Shriver, who started it, is kind of like a saint. She started it back in many, many years ago, I think in the 60s. So let's take a listen to this. All right. Again, they wanted this very Olympian. They wanted a fanfare, and they wanted something that had energy, had a driving rhythm section, and they wanted it to be uplifting, uplifting, uplifting. Here we go. So rather than go, I went through some orchestration stuff last week with the one of the tracks that I went through that I use the same principles here, but I want to talk about a few other things with this. Now, this sounds huge, and you can see that I've got here, let me zoom in on this. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Right, these are all the different mics, all these green tracks. This is the first pass of ensemble, right? Then these red ones are the ensemble pass 2. And then I did another pass of trumpets. So what do I mean by that? Well, one of the ways that you get a bigger than life sound is by double tracking. And they do that all the time in pop music with vocals. Well, why not do it with orchestral music as well? So there's 2 ways of doing that. And basically what I did was, if I just solo the green ones, this is the fanfare open with just all the mics. Right? And that sounds good, but that doesn't sound big enough, right? So the first thing I did was I just had the trumpets double that opening part, and that's these tracks right here. So if I take it off, you can hear the difference in sound. So I'll play it one time with and one time without. And without this doubled. Right, you can just hear it just adds so much, just that. And then I don't have the second ensemble, the rest of the ensemble with the second pass come in until the more choral section, right? So in other words, we start off with just the trumpets doubled. And then right here. You see how much bigger and richer that is with the doubled? So that's one technique. Now, there's 2 ways of going about doing that, right? You can do what I've done here, which is play the same thing twice. Or let's say you've got trumpets in three trumpets lines going, right? You could have all 6 players, all 3 players playing the same part 2 or 3 times, or you could have all 3 trumpets playing the soprano voice, and the next pass they all play the alto voice, and on the third pass they all play the tenor voice. That's a much different sound, and you guys can go do your own research to hear how that sounds differently. That's better if you want something a little bit more pointed and edgier. And the one example I give is if you go on YouTube, you can hear the a cappella version of Because by the Beatles, which is all 3 of them singing their individual parts 3 times. So they sang the song 3 times. Or you could listen to Queen. There's a lot of a cappella Queen stuff that you can find isolated online. And what Queen did was they all sang the same line, and then they sang the next line. They sang the top line, the alto line, the tenor line, the bass line. They all sang the same pitches all the way through, and it's a much different, more edgy sound. And, one has more of a regal wash and one is just more distinct where you can hear all the different parts. You have much more control for certain kinds of music that way. So that's sort of a different recording technique. But as a composer, you need to know these things and be able to employ them to your benefit. Okay. So now the next thing is that there's a list of deliverables, right? So with this particular bit, I had to have the opening fanfare into the mnemonic. So we've got, right? And I built this into the session and we just recorded these things. So I'll just take it from the end part and you'll hear what I mean. Oh, there's no mnemonic, just into a hard ending, right? So that they have that isolated. And then the first mnemonic isolated. And then a different version of that. And then here we've got the end tag. And then there's just a couple of different tags, right, that I put together. And you have to have these things because you need to do edits different lengths. And then this is a different sting, right? So this is the 90-second close version, right? I had to do that, which I was able to edit with some of these other bits that I recorded separately. Yeah, so you could see that I've got all that stuff available, so I can make a 30-second, a 60-second, a 10-second. I can make an opening. I can make a vamp. I can do all sorts of stuff. But you have to have all the material, and it takes meticulous planning out. Now, I don't want to go through this musically, technically, but just let's say that the opening bit, I've done a lot of Copland-esque kind of chord voicings, and in the drums, I've gone over how to make big drums and other ones, and I've gone over how I orchestrate something to sound like this, where all the sections fit together. Is there any choir in this? I don't think there is. No choir in this. Oh, yes, there is choir and there's winds. So let's just take a listen to the sampled stuff. So that comes in here, I believe. That's these tracks here. Notice here, same technique on the last track with the electric guitars. My acoustic guitars are capoed, and then the electric guitars are playing the lower notes, an octave lower than that. And it really just opens things up, and it leaves a lot of space for the brass. And let's listen to how that fits in with the rest of the verse, with the rest of the band. That's sampled bass that I played. So if I take my, let's see, if I take my rhythm guitar, do I have something just for the brass? So you can hear how the guitar fits right in. Again, everything fits in. You can break down these things into different sections, and they all fit in, and they all fit like a glove. So let's leave this, and we're going to do about 15 minutes more of this. I've got one more little bit that I'm not going to go over the whole thing, but I want to talk about different recording elements. But you can hear how this has all the different bits that you need. You need to have a recognizable mnemonic that people can remember. And it's very uplifting. It fits perfectly, and it's very energetic. It's very positive. So we'll leave this, and then we'll go to the next one, which is the Invictus Games. And the Invictus Games are another great athletic event. It's basically for wounded warriors that they've gotten serious injuries in the line of duty, and they compete in these sports, which helps them with their rehab and to get back into regular society. If maybe they don't have some legs, or they've got one arm missing, or they've got psychological issues from getting an explosion near their head. But this is so the beginning of this is it's serious, right? It's an uplifting event, but it's very serious because at the end of the day, these people, their lives have been changed forever by a really incredibly serious things. So let's take a listen to this. All right, so that's only a 60. And then you could see I've got the 10-second open. I've got 45-second more to come, 2 different versions of that, a 30-second billboard. All right, it just comes through there, 15 seconds coming right up. So these are all deliverables that ESPN asked for. And it just different edits. And you really need to know how to do that, because this was a combination of me getting them to record a few things and doing some edits. So I had to do that myself. I couldn't trust that with anybody else. So with this, it starts off with this very, very somber march, right? And it's live drums played by Carter McLean, who plays the drums at Lion King. Right? He recorded all these different snare drums for me. That's these green tracks here. That's all these. Right, so he used like a bunch of different drums. Well, I guess it's 3 or 4, and then he recorded the top and the bottom. And then there's a lot of all the strings are from Spitfire, and so is the percussion. I've got the low frame drum there during the verse part. Again, serious, right? March, military march. But, and it's kind of uplifting and somber at the same time. Now, in the very beginning, now this is what I was talking about earlier about miking up French horns. So when you're in the audience and you're listening to French horns, you're not hearing the direct sound. You're hearing the sound that's bouncing off of the walls, because the bell of the horn is pointing away from you. So this is the sound of the microphone being in back of the player. Right, and I took a lot of high end off of that, right? So, but without that, it's very brassy, and it's not somber enough. So if I would have just turn down this one, which I'll talk about in a second, and just play the French horn with the back mic. It almost sounds like an Old Spice commercial or something like that. It doesn't really work. But when you put a microphone in front of the French horn, right? You don't get as much of the higher overtones, and we brought out with EQ, we really shaped the sound the way that we wanted it. And then when you add this, the two of them together. So that's part of orchestration, for 21st century composers, is knowing when and how to mic things to achieve the effect. What sound do you want from the French horn? What sounds do you want? And that's why with sample libraries, it's good to know all the articulations they give you and learn how to use them correctly. It can really add a lot to your compositions. And then here, and the second time through, so the first time through, it's just the soloist, and then 4 horns together, overdubbed twice, and then a second horn part here, which is a little different than the first. So if I just solo these out. Right, and then that fits in with this. Whoops. So those two parts fit together. And I change key. So what I do here is the trumpets play the melody. So there's that melody phrase, and then there's the answering phrase. Do bum. And here, so if we could. Yeah, so that very somber, but then uplifting and positive, and with your mnemonic at the end. So just take a quick look at that, and they've got all these different versions like I showed you before. One other thing, if you're going to go into the recording studio, print your click track. You can see right here I printed my click track, so that you know that everything is always lining up. That's a trick. All right, so that brings us to the end of this stream. Again, if you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching. Please like, subscribe. Please ring that bell to be notified. Also, again, this has been demonetized. 100% certain it's going to be demonetized. If you could find in yourself to purchase a single or two from my iTunes or Amazon collection of over 10 albums, that would be really great. And in conclusion, what I want to say about this is that writing sports themes can be really satisfying, and it's not one thing. If you remember back to the beginning of this session, I was playing you all those different styles of music that work in all these different sporting programs, because sports themes don't just refer to the actual athletic events. If you think about football's on one time a week, right? But there's talk and all sorts of other kinds of programming that are on constantly. And so there's always new shows coming up that need new theme songs. And it's not for everybody. You have to be able to write things that are memorable. You have to understand what a mnemonic is and how to say in 4, 5, 6, 7 notes something that's going to define what a show is, and something that's memorable, and that's something that I have had a lot of experience doing, and the more you do it, the better you get at it. So, all right. So with that, hopefully some of you are still watching. And if you're watching this in the future, thank you so much. I've been Pete Calandra, and I will catch you again on next Friday's Inside Track. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you so much for watching.